Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 73.
We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldeman Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. It's another week of Let's Be Well Together podcast. I like starting with that little turn of phrase. It's John Webster, and I'm here with Elise Seifert. Hello, Elise.
Hello.
So what is on your mind today?
Well, I actually found a picture posted on social media about different signs of burnout that I thought were pretty interesting surrounding our mental well-being.
I know, and when I looked at it, I'm like, oh man, this happens to me a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I must be burnt out a lot.
I think a lot of us are. I think that's a part of our culture, really.
I like to think that I'm, tough and got it together, but, really it's a struggle a lot of times for all of us.
I think so. And do we really need to tough it out? I don't know. I think sometimes we really do need to take time to take care of ourselves. So maybe we can read out these signs of burnout for our listeners. And maybe, John, you can start with the first one on our list.
And just before I do, it looks like it's from an Instagram account called Self-Care is a Priority, all one word. I'm not sure so much about where you end up, like how you deal with all this, but what I'm taking from this is I got to start recognizing in myself that when I'm feeling these things, I need to introspect and figure out if I'm burnt out.
Definitely.
So then, it could be another conversation about what you do if you are burnt out. So I'll start with number one, constantly feeling exhausted.
The second on our list is frequently getting sick.
Number three is changes in appetite.
Number 4 is feeling unmotivated or unsatisfied.
Number 5 is isolating yourself.
And number 6 is negative or pessimistic outlook.
Boy, yikes. They're all so close to home. So is there, a couple that you might want to talk about?
I think one that really affects me is frequently getting sick. I know I'm a teacher, and for me to call in to say that I'm too sick to come into work, I feel very guilty to do that. And it's also a lot of work on my part to have to create plans for another teacher to take in and come into my class and cover. And I know that that's something that's felt a lot by other teachers at my school. And so often I will just not call in sick. I will go to school, I will be feeling sick, and it just makes it worse. So I know often if I do that, I end up feeling worse than I already did, and I end up being sick for longer. So after the pandemic, I think it helped me to realize that it's okay to take a day for myself to help myself to heal when I am feeling sick, and how much better I will perform after taking that one day rather than having maybe 5 or 6 days where I feel maybe at 80% rather than 100%. So I think this is something that's important for me to remember. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who feel like they can't take time for themselves when they're feeling sick. Maybe if they're a parent or in another job, they feel like they don't have the time to take care of themselves. But I think that you do, and you should.
So for example, for me, unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to say that I get cold sores sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And they tend to come on when I have anxiety or stress. Mm-hmm. But for you as a kindergarten teacher, you might be sick simply because there's germs and whatnot going around your class.
Exactly,
so
yes.
Is there any way for you to tell? So for me, if I get a cold sore, I do think, oh no, I'm stressed about something. What is it? And I try and figure it out. But if you're saying you're starting to feel sick, how can you tell when it's a sign of burnout versus just a simple virus that's going around?
I think I can tell by the way that I'm feeling sick. If I'm manifesting in a cough, that's typically a cold that's going around. But for me and my body, if I'm manifesting my cold maybe with a sore throat or a headache, that typically is telling me that I need to take a day for myself because I'm feeling stressed or burnt out. And
is it working at all? Like if you do take a day for yourself, do you find that that helps you recover a bit better?
I definitely do. I think, like I said, if I take one day, then I can come back the next day, I'm at 100%. Whereas if I go in and I'm still feeling that stress and that burnout, I'll be at 80 or 70% for the whole week. And that's not helping anyone. It's not helping myself or my coworkers or my students.
Okay. I would like to talk about the last one, and because this is really problematic because it multiplies a problem that you have. I do have a tendency, if I start to be burnt out, then I also start to have less patience and I start to get frustrated and I have a bit of a temper. You might not know that from my smooth voice on the radio, but so the problem is I start to get burnt out and then I start to get, I get angry easier and I have to work to not snap at people. And sometimes I do. And I really try hard not to, but it's really frustrating because you have a problem, which is that you're tired and you need to re-energize, and you're making it worse now by driving people away and creating more problems. And then you're more tired and you're more anxious. So I have been working really hard in the last few years, especially, to try not to do that. And, now that I think of it, I didn't really think of it in this context, that it's a sign of burnout. I thought usually that it's more a sign of stress or anxiety.
Right.
I don't know the answers. I'm just saying, wow, now that I see this on the list, if I start to feel that kind of snappy feeling, I'm maybe going to think more about maybe burnout's the cause as opposed to something else.
And maybe just recognizing it in yourself will help you to feel more release or less stressed. And
that's one of the themes that I'm trying to communicate in this show, which is try and learn more about yourself, introspect. And the more we read things like this, the more factors we can consider when we're trying to introspect and find out what's affecting us. And it takes work, but it's worth it.
It's like we're putting tools for us in our toolbox for our mental health.
Exactly. So and what's another one that you're interested in?
Well, when you were talking about the negative and pessimistic outlook, it sounded to me like it's kind of cyclical. You become negative or pessimistic because you're feeling stressed, and then that in turn makes you more stressed or more burnt out. And I think that's the same with feeling unmotivated or unsatisfied, which is the fourth item on our list. So I know sometimes I just feel like laying on the couch. I feel like I can't get up. I just need to lay on the couch and watch a TV show. And I have these goals that I want to achieve. And then I feel guilty for not achieving those goals, usually personal ones. So for example, I like to set a goal for myself to play the piano 4 times a week. I really enjoy playing the piano. I find it's a great way to relieve stress and let go of my day when I come home from my job. And sometimes I come home and I just need to lay on the couch. And then I feel guilty for laying on the couch, and then I don't want to go on the piano the next day. It's a cyclical event, and then I just feel worse about myself. So I think recognizing that maybe I just need to lay on the couch for half an hour, watch one TV show, and then if I'm feeling up to it, I can do my task. And if I'm not, I don't do it that day, and that's okay.
The thing that gets me, the more we talk about this, to me, all of these things feed each other.
They really do.
Right? So one feeds the other. You're getting sick, and maybe that's maybe a little bit different, but then you start feeling negative and pessimistic. You start snapping at people. Next thing you know, you're lying in the couch unmotivated. And for me, switching into number 5, isolating yourself, that's like my go-to move, right? I'm a private person. I don't really like explaining myself. I don't like people seeing me on weak spots. And so I'm really bad at that. I just tend to find, not only do I lie on a couch, but preferably somewhere where there's nobody. And it just gets worse. And the next thing you know, I'm constantly feeling exhausted and, I lose my appetite. So all these things just feed each other in a really negative way.
They really do. And it's not so much a list and more of just a weaving between these different activities that can be signs of burnout.
Right. We don't have all the answers, but is there anything that you can even think of, like 1 or 2 things that you might do if let's say you're like, oh no, I just realized I'm lying on the couch and I've found some time to introspect. I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you might try to get past that?
I might try just recognizing what I'm doing and why I need to do it rather than making myself feel bad for doing it. So I think just recognizing this is what my body needs right now, and I don't need to feel bad about that is what I will work towards doing.
I think my 2 go-tos are, first of all, I've noticed this over the past couple of years. If I get in these kind of spots, I often, if I think back, realize I haven't gone for a run in a while, or I haven't done any kind of exercise. So that's really a go-to. Just even if I'm not feeling well enough to run, even then I'll be, hey, Sheila, can we go for a walk? Like, let's just go for a walk. And that seems to help a lot. And then sleep. Sleep is another big one for me. So
important.
I mean, let's not forget, burnout is often caused by being overworked and overtired. And so it's time to get back to a nice sleep schedule. So maybe another time we can start finding some more information on how people address burnout. But I love this little social media post to remind me that some of these things which I associate with other stuff might be signs of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the category of social wellness. I'm speaking again with Shereen Samuels, my law firm's head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Shereen is doing amazing work at our law firm, Gowling WLG. Welcome back, Shereen.
Good to be here with you again, John.
Shereen has over 23 years of experience in DEI workplace initiatives, activities like change work, curriculum development, and group process facilitation. Shereen has experience in leadership, policy development, strategic planning, communications, board governance, and risk management. She's the creator of the Meaningful Inclusion Matrix, a framework to guide organizations in becoming more inclusive. Shereen, you pointed me to an internet article by Freddie DeBoer called Of Course You Know What Woke Means, with a subheading, I'd rather use any other term at this point, but can we get real, please? And although we didn't really connect with much of the article, it was a springboard for discussion. Personally, I'm frustrated by the use of the word woke as a weapon to shut down discussion of issues, to give the back of the hand to initiatives and inquiries without really looking at what the problem is. Now, at a high level, what do you take from this article?
It's so interesting because I think it's quite a long article, and he makes many points along the way. But it's not till the very last paragraph that I think he actually hits his thesis. Because in the very last paragraph, he says something along the lines of, I don't know if any of this is accurate, but I think we can all agree, and he puts it in bold print, something has changed. And I think I got to the end of the article and I was like, that right there is the core point of this, is that he feels, and I think there are a lot of people feeling like this right now, which is why that article was a problem to me, because I felt as though it was dancing around something that is real for people, and that is something has changed. And I think that the something that's changed is that we're in a moment of generational shift. You know, like when we think about, the Civil War movement in the States in the 60s, that was a generational shift moment. And I think we're in another. And I think that what you've got is some folks who feel as though the world is passing them by, or the way they understand the world to work suddenly is turned on its head. And I think that at its heart is kind of where the absolute fury that I hear people imbuing the word woke with, like people are angry, but if you try and press to understand what they're angry about, it's not very clear. So I think really what it boils down to is that it boils down to something has changed.
There's so much polarization right now in politics in the world, and discussions and people talking to each other. Are they also times of polarization when people are making these big advancements? Is it times where there's lots of controversy and clashing?
I think absolutely, because I think what happens, I've certainly spoken about this in the context of the workplace, that we've got, first millennials and now Gen Z coming into the workplace in numbers now, right? Like they are the ones who are coming in every year, and millennials and Gen Z together are set to overtake for example, the voting power from the baby boomers. Now-ish.
Okay.
This is when it's happening, right? We're in the moment right now.
Okay.
And, when we think about millennials and Gen Z, for example, they grew up with the Charter of Human Rights in Canada. Most of us that are from older generations than that did not grow up with a Bill of Rights, but they grew up believing that was just how the world works.
Right.
Right. There are many differences in terms of how they believe the world works, and how baby boomers or even Gen Xers grew up believing the world works. I think that's the crux of what we're experiencing, because what I see at the workplace is not only that shift in like, what's the bare minimum standard for what we should expect in terms of freedoms, in terms of tolerance, in terms of rights and equity, not just that where they think that minimum standard sits in a completely different place than it has for the last 25 years in workplaces, but they also have a next level sophistication about how they will judge how you're doing and what you're doing.
Interesting.
We really are in a moment where the generation that's coming up and moving into sort of dominance in the workplace, in the marketplace, just has completely different expectations. And baby boomers are retiring. And so I really think we're in a moment where the torch of power, we talked last time about, that who gets to hold power. And I think we're seeing that torch being passed. And I think that is not happening without some pains.
We're in this moment of shift. I want to tell you a little bit like what I'm thinking of where we're going. So let me just ramble on for a couple minutes and then I might come back to each of these bullets. But I do want to talk about the word woke because I'm hoping to get past what I think is a frustrating use of it. When I heard people starting to insult and whatnot, I actually did some internet searching. And one of the things I came across was an article that said that word is traced back to decades ago when the U.S. Black community was either before or going through those events where change was made. And it was a way to remind each other to say, stay alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. Yes. And that makes sense. Stay awake, stay woke.
Stay woke, yeah.
But now it's being used differently. And I think unfairly, I want to ask you kind of what you see the word, what does it mean to you? How do you see it being used? And do you believe that people are using the word woke? Is that preventing them from actually talking about the real issues? And then how can we get past that? With that in mind, if I can just step back, like, what does the word woke mean to you?
Well, as you said, that history of it coming from the Jim Crow era in the States and being, part of African American dialect. And it was a way of people saying to each other, you as an individual may be having a really hard time. Remember that it's not just you.
Okay.
Remember that there are whole structures in place here. And remember to stay awake. Remember to see that for what it is and not just lose yourself in despair.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it in that context of the individual versus the society that you're living in.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you saw I think it was 2014 when the Ferguson riots happened and, the development, the evolution of the Black Lives Matter movement out of that, what happened was you had a new generation of Black people calling back to the language of their fathers and their grandfathers and their mothers and their grandmothers and saying, stay woke, because it had cultural significance, right? And it was saying the same thing, like we're decades away from that, but still stay alert to racial prejudice, stay alert to how it's showing up in our lives now, because it's showing up differently than it did in our ancestors' lives, but it's still showing up and we gotta stay awake. We gotta be working together to fight it.
And do you see the word being used unfairly these days? And if so, how do you see it being used?
Well, yes. I mean, it's one of my biggest frustrations because when we talk about the etymology of the word, I think it's got such deep cultural significance. And it irritates me when it's used as a means of shutting down conversation, because that is how it's being used. It's being used by people who don't want to think about what might lie underneath woke. And we talked in the last episode about the difference between non-racist and anti-racist. And, that move towards thinking of the experience of discrimination as being built into structures. The minute you start talking in that way, people will use the word woke to shut down the conversation. Almost, it feels to me almost out of fear, not wanting to hear it. And so I do believe that that's how it's being used currently. And it is frustrating because it is a word that has such meaning to the Black community, that to have it co-opted in that way, I think is painful.
The other thing that bothers me about it is everybody gets lumped in the same group, right? So you're not only interested in social justice when it comes to race or ethnicity, but you're probably also a really left-wing person who wants to give out tons of money on social programs. And it's like, you got to be really careful not to put everybody in the same camp just by their views on one topic. So, But in any event, that's just me on my soapbox.
Well, no, because that's exactly where that article went.
Okay.
Just everybody was thrown in the boat. And the article was so funny because it was like, essentially he was saying, I really want to use woke to describe all these people. And if I can't use woke, you have to tell me what word to use. And, you know, I kind of looked at that and thought, why do you need a word? Why do you need some sort of single notion to boil down all of these really varied, complex ideas and worldviews? Why do you need a word?
And for me, that's kind of where we end up at the point I'd like to make, which is I have a philosophy background. I love breaking problems down to their basic building blocks and then trying to work for it. And I also appreciate that kind of view of the world, putting everything in pigeonholes, is kind of limiting in a way, but that's fine. But I like that as a starting point a lot of times. And if somebody just says woke and lumps everything together, we don't even get to the basic point. Like, for example, what issue are we actually talking about?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
So if I say, for example, that, you know, should we talk about housing problem? Should we talk about LGBTQ community? Should we talk about race issues? You know, let me at least tell you what topic I'm talking about, and then maybe we can start talking about that. So I guess my thinking is one way we get past this word is to forget about these labels and start trying to better understand the conversation that we're trying to have. What is the issue we're trying to address?
Yeah.
What are the options to address it? What are pros and cons? That kind of thing.
You know, I was reading a really interesting article a while back that was talking about the post-facts North America. I mean, it goes back years. I mean, I think even to when we think about George W. Bush and the, you know, weapons of mass destruction era and the ways in which, let's just say, was careless in the way that he presented truth, that concept of truth. And so for the last 20 or 25 years, what we've had is a slow breakdown of a belief in or a trust in evidence-based conversation. Because I think this, for me, is one of the things that's most pernicious about this sort of desire to sort of label people. And to be clear, the labeling is happening on the left and the right? True. Like I see people on the left wielding the word fascist very, very broadly, right? With perhaps not a clear understanding of what a fascist is or what fascism looks like specifically. And so for me, I think the way we get back to discourse is having some sort of trust in evidence, right? So if we're talking, for instance, about trans rights, you know, rather than having that discussion, and it's ironic to me because, again, the article that was our starting point talks about emotionality as a hallmark of wokeness. And I don't believe that that's my experience. I feel as though those of us who are working in the field work very, very hard to use evidence wherever we can that what we're saying has some basis in reality. Because we do get dismissed, right? We get dismissed out of hand if we can't make the case in some way outside of our own heads.
That's kind of right in the wheelhouse of my thinking, which is this concept of alternative facts. It almost blew me away when I started hearing people talking about that. I agree with you. One of the things I lament right now in our discourse is we can't even agree on the facts. And it's frustrating. And I'll give you kind of an example, an analogy. So I work as a litigation lawyer. Okay, yes. So in a litigation lawyer, on a piece of paper called a pleading, the plaintiff says, here's what I say are the facts and what should come of it. And the defendant can say anything they want. Like the plaintiff can say anything they want, the defendant can say anything they want. And then you go to court and you cobble together whatever evidence you can because you're trying to persuade either a judge or a jury to believe your set of facts or the other set of facts.
Yeah.
And so you can like create them, right? And that is theoretically possible. Now it seems to be the way a lot of politicians and people like to act now. They're like, well, I can say whatever I want. So I think this is the set of facts that supports my way of thinking. So I'm going to say these are the true facts, prove that it's wrong. Right? Yeah, and you're like, exactly. Wait a minute. Can't we just measure something? Isn't there some way to measure this?
And the funny thing is that all these things are being measured.
Right.
You know, there are researchers working really hard on measuring all these social issues.
But meanwhile, they're like rejected because it's, there's science and their ivory tower and all that stuff. So, if there's some way that we can start agreeing on the facts, that would sure help, I think.
Yeah. Or at least listening to them, right?
True.
Listening to facts that don't fit our preconceived notions. I think that's really one of the difficulties we're up against right now, is living in sort of, again, what that article tagged a post-facts world. I hope we're not in a post-facts world. I hope we're just in a post-facts phase that's going to end. But
yeah, you've got to be both sides. Every side has to be open-minded on that. So if you're going to tell other people that they have to be open to a different set of facts, then I also have to be open to a different set of facts. But having said that, I'm going to ask for some objective way of measuring it if we're making an important decision on it. And by the way, I've gone through a lot of phases in my life, and I happily settled on not needing ultimate proof, truth with a capital T every time. I'm willing to go with what the most persuasive and most evidence-based truth is, and then move on, understanding that there's some limitations on what we can believe. Okay, that seems to be veering off in a different topic, and we've kind of burned through our time again. So we are at the end, and just like last time, I'm going to go back and ask you that question that we ask every guest. It's in the context of having different areas of wellness in our life and not enough time to keep them all going at any given time. It's our little mini wellness check-in. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing you can do to foster wellness in that area?
I don't know that I would say neglecting, and I'm going to pick a different one than I picked last time. I would say that, I'm looking at your beautiful graphic and thinking about my spiritual health. And I would say that that's one that I tend to give short shrift to. And one of the things that I've been exploring recently is a meditation practice, which for me really fills that cup for me. So, although I think historically I've certainly neglected that. I'm working on how to fill it in a way that feels authentic for me.
I've said at least 5 times on the show that there's so many compelling reasons why I want to get into meditation. I'm one of these people whose mind spins and spins and spins, and I'm told that that's a really great way of trying to slow that down.
Yeah, so it is.
So I think I will also.
There's a great book called The Untethered Soul. That is an incredible argument for why to start meditating as a practice. It's really amazing.
Well, that's a great thought to leave on. And thank you again, Shereen, for doing 2 interviews. We really appreciate it.
It's been so much fun, John. Thanks for having me.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. This weekend, I got a good old dose of small world syndrome, but it was excellent. I was playing at a wedding, which is always an honor and always a fun time, but this one was especially fun because it was the wedding of one of the drummers of my former bands, the Purple Tones. And his name is Sam, and he is an incredible drummer, also running Freshwater Funk. The keyboard player in that band is actually my old piano teacher from when I was a youngster. He has another band called the Sarcastic Onions, which is a great rock band. And then the Purple Tones, of course. So Sam was getting married, and he asked me to play at the ceremony and during cocktails, which, like I said, it's a huge honor to be included in something like that. And so I made the drive down, and I was setting things up, saw Sam, and that was a great time. A beautiful ceremony, a beautiful hot summertime day, surrounded by good company, and just a beautiful time. But what made it especially fun was that most of the people there knew Sam, of course, and because Sam is such a busy drummer, lots of the people there were musicians. And the night took a really interesting turn. The Purple Tones were hired to play, the party portion of the evening. But in between their sets, because there were so many other musicians there, other bands that had most, if not all of their members, went up and did a few songs. So the Purple Tones did their first set, and then Sam's other band, Freshwater Funk, went up and did a few tunes, and then Purple Tones did another set, and then Sam's other band, the Sarcastic Onions, went up and did a few tunes, and then the Purple Tones did another set. And this is where it starts to get even more fun. For some of the last few songs, the Purple Tones called up the original lineup. Now, of course, Sam, being busy getting married and all, wasn't playing with the Purple Tones this evening. They had hired my friend Steve, with whom I've played several shows, to fill in, and he did a great job, of course, no questions there. But for the last couple songs, Steve jumped off the drum throne, Sam took his spot, and the keyboard player named Matt jumped off his 2-rack keys setup, and I took his spot, and the original Purple Tones lineup banged through a couple tunes. So that was really fun and really special for me, and I'm sure for Sam as well. But where it gets even crazier, falls even further into the small world phenomenon, is that the wonderful catering, they were just incredible. Our friend Sheila was on that team, spearheading the operation. So it was the wildest thing. I walk in, I'm about to go play the ceremony, just checking all the gear one last time, and I see Sheila running around. It's like, oh hey. So, what are the odds of that? Of all the weddings, we happen to be playing at the same one and working at the same one. Too cool. That's my little story. A bunch of musicians coming together to celebrate one of our own, tying the knot, and a great big congratulations to Sam and Nicole. All the best, and thank you again for having me as part of your wedding. That's it from me today. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Hopefully this wildfire smoke clears out of here soon. But what can you do, eh? That's all I've got. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We don't have any ads yet, and that's on purpose. We're sharing stories and experiences to give back, to inspire, and get people talking about wellness. 2 quick points. My personality is to present things in a progression. Once I cover a point, I often don't go back to it. If you want to see the whole picture about wellness I'm trying to paint, listen to all our episodes from the start. Second, it's costly to put out a podcast. You can help me defray that cost by buying my book, Accidentally Well by John Webster. It's available on Amazon, Indigo, or anywhere you buy books online. Please consider buying a copy.
Move that body like we're meant to do. Hi everyone, it's Sheila here, and I'm here with my sister Laurie.
Hi everybody.
And she was just telling me about Pilates. I have never done Pilates, and I'm sure I would love it. But I have no idea what it is.
Okay. So Pilates it's really fun. First of all, it's to music.
Okay.
And it's like 1980s usually music, at least at my studio.
Already loving it. Madonna all the way.
100%. So super fun, super hype music.
Okay.
Okay. So imagine that. And then it's a low impact 80-20 aerobic type exercise.
Okay.
Okay. And there's a series of exercises that you work through that work the entire body. So starting with glutes, and you're doing bridges, and then you're doing stomach work, then you're doing planks and arms and shoulders, then you're doing cardio, you're doing some squats, and you end with more cardio. Everything is 30 seconds off, 20 seconds on.
So when you're off, what do?
You breathe.
Oh.
Because then you got to go again.
Okay, so
and
you're just
30
staying
seconds
there
hard, and then you're for 20 seconds.
For 20 seconds, 30 seconds hard, 20 seconds rest.
Right.
And that continues the whole class.
The whole class.
And how long is the class?
An hour.
Okay.
Begins with grounding, like Savasana, meditation.
Okay.
Ends with grounding, which is only about 30 seconds.
Okay.
And then you're into it.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So it's really fun. Where I do it, it's a warm studio. It's not a hot studio, but it's a warm studio.
Okay.
You also have the option to doing it with weights. So then you're doing lunges, and you're doing it with a tricep.
A dumbbell or a 5 pound, 10 pound, whatever you want, right?
Yes.
You can add those weights in there. I mean, it's just great even just to hold it, the weights, right? To add that extra leg work. But if you do bicep curls while you're doing your lunges, you're working more muscles.
Right. You're working more muscles. So it's a muscle building class.
Okay. Because I also thought that Pilates was a stretch class.
There's no stretch in the class that I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. No stretch at all.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And when you're saying that it's a set exercises, is it exactly the same every single time you go?
No, but the sequence is the same in terms of you're doing the bridges on the floor, then you're doing the stomach work, and then you're doing arm work, shoulder work, and then standing, and then cardio.
And it's just different.
Burpees, but different exercises.
Different exercises for each one. It's just basically working the same muscle groups.
Right. That's right. Kind of like a ballet class in that way. Like they can change up the exercises that they do, but it's still working the glute muscles or the hamstrings or the quads or whatever it
That's
is.
excellent. And what do you get out of the class? Why do you like these classes, or how often do you do them?
So interestingly enough, I went to a physio appointment and the therapist told me that my inner thighs were not very strong and that my quad muscles on the outer thigh were overbearing the inner thigh muscles. Okay.
Which
So-
makes sense as a dancer.
Makes sense.
Because the outside thigh muscle is your turnout muscle. And as a ballet dancer, especially, we are turning out all the time.
So this is creating some of the tension that I'm having in the hip and
Hip.
lower back. So I decided to start doing Pilates. The other thing is that my shoulders, I was getting a lot of tension in my shoulder and neck. Same thing. I needed to do more shoulder work. And the yoga that I practice doesn't necessarily work the shoulder in the same way.
It stretches it for sure, but probably doesn't strengthen it.
Not as much.
Not as much.
Yeah. So I started doing Pilates for that reason. And then I realized how difficult it really is.
Interesting.
And how weak some of my muscles were because I'm under this impression that I'm in really great shape.
Don't you hate that when you're under the impression that you're in really good shape and then you go to a class and you're like, why can they do this and I can't?
Yeah. So that happened. And I thought, man, I got to do this more. So I started doing it more.
That's
And
really interesting.
Yeah. I do it once a week. So now I try to do, my goal is 3 yogas and 1 Pilates a week, and then 1 yin class, which is the stretch that you're talking about.
Excellent.
And I do that at home by myself. Like I go for a long walk, then I come back and I do a good stretch, a good yin stretch. So
That's excellent. Well, I think I'm going to try and find a Pilates class.
I can take you.
Give it a try. Yeah, because that sounds like a lot of fun.
Super fun.
I'll wear a headband and everything.
Do it.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. Picture this, out for a run, and cherishing how much I love music and how much it helps me. One of the things I love about long distance running is that once I head out the door, that's where I'm meant to be until I'm done. Whatever else is happening in my life, this is where I'm meant to be right now. And while I'm here, taking one step at a time, one breath at a time. Feel the wind on my face. Feel the sun. Taste the oxygen. Savor the feelings of a body in motion, like it's meant to be. So picture me in that happy place, thinking about that. And I was thinking about how much music makes me feel good and helps me. I have several playlists that I use at work. And the music that works best for me, so it doesn't distract me, so I can work, but not distracting, are things without lyrics. So things like jazz mixes, which I've made, guitar instrumental mixes, which I've made, and some classical mixes. The day before, I was at my desk and I received a really shitty email. And, I'm not going to get into why, but it really put me in a bad mood. Fortunately, I resisted the urge to send the response that crossed my mind right away. We've all been there. I'm okay with letting those things pass and figuring out a more productive approach. But until it passes, it still puts me in a shitty frame of mind. So that had just happened. And some classical music had came on. I started hearing it in the background. And I was thinking to myself, how can people have come up with this? How could anyone have written this? How can anybody play this? The version you're hearing is a royalty-free one. It's Vivaldi's Winter Movement 1 by John Harrison with the Wichita State University Chambers Players, which I obtained from the Free Music Archive. And it was sweeping me away for a minute. And I was blown away. And fortunately, it just blew that shitty email feeling away with it. And what else could I say but thank you, music. Thank you, Vivaldi. And people are amazing. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin. We are going to talk about something I saw on Instagram that I related to so well. It's actually Kermit the Frog, and he's lying down on his back. He says, I'm stuck between I need to save money and you only live once. This is so true, I find.
I know. Especially as you get older.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you get older, because you feel like there were so many things when you're younger. Oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'll get to that. And then when you get older, you're worried that you don't have that much time left.
Yeah, you're running out the clock.
Yeah, and you're trying to save for your retirement, but then are we going to make it that far? Or are we going to be able to travel when we're that old? Like you worry about things like that now that I'm seeing, our parents and older parents and their mobility issues when they get older.
It's a really good point. And you see it regularly where you hear the story. It's tragic a lot of times where people worked really hard. They saved a long time and they're finally getting close to their retirement.
Yeah.
And either just before or just after somebody gets a cancer diagnosis or whatever. The other one for me, and why I'm such a big proponent of Move That Body, I think to myself, like I saw my own father, for example, become less and less mobile as he got older.
Yes.
I do not want that. I don't want to get to retirement and then not be able to move around. So I still have daydreams, and I'm been talking about this for most of the year. I'm still struggling. Like I'm still not losing the weight I need to lose. That's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. But I want to be able to, with any luck, knock on wood, I want to be able to run when I'm in my 80s.
Right. Or at least move, like walk quickly. You like to be able to be mobile for sure. So that is definitely something that you think about, but you're also trying to save too at this time, saving for your retirement and things are just so expensive. I love going out for fancy dinners. I love going to Langdon Hall or like the Bruce at Stratford. And when we're talking expensive dinners, it's almost
So for people who don't know, those are both amazing places with like spectacular food, so they'll do like a tasting menu in the fall or the spring with locally grown stuff and amazing chefs, but it's really expensive, right? So you daydream about it and you go once in a while, but not often.
You're trying to balance between experiences, and they cost a lot of money, and trying to save money, because eating locally, you can do that at home too. And we do really well at that, trying to eat healthy and eat locally and just cook at home and save money that way. But it's a grind.
Yeah. Now, I do think though that we're doing okay in this balancing act. You only do live once, right?
Yes.
So going to, for example, Langdon Hall, it's a wonderful experience and it is really expensive. And one part of me is like, you can't justify spending that much money on food.
No.
But another part of me is like, this is just such an amazing experience.
Yes.
The ambiance and more importantly, the food and what they do. A lot of their stuff they get from the grounds that they cook on. Mm-hmm. And so I think to myself, okay, well, most of the time we don't go out to eat very, very often at all.
No.
We almost always have home cooked meals. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a nice balancing act. You pick the ones that are really special. And once in a while, you save for it and you do it. But you don't just throw your money away. So I agree with you. Like I'm always stuck in between these two things. I hope we're striking the right balance. But the only way you can, I think, is to think about it. But sometimes I'm tired of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But you do need to have that balance, right? The spending and the trying to save enough money so that you can live as long as you live, but also trying to enjoy the experiences while you have it.
Another one that reminds me of goes back to Paris. So Sheila had always wanted to go to Paris. Mm-hmm. And it's expensive just to go to Europe. And I won't say what birthday it was, but it was a little while ago. Mm-hmm. And so I bought a surprise trip to Paris. Mm-hmm. And we were only going to be there, I think, for 4 or 5 nights. Mm-hmm. And the point I was going to make here is that part of it was I thought to myself, I wonder if I'll ever get to go there again. Mm-hmm. I sure hope so. I mean, I hope I get to travel a lot, but I just don't know.
Right.
So I started looking for really amazing restaurants. And then I realized, wait a minute, it's going to be really expensive. And then I thought, no, you know what? I'm only ever going to be in Paris maybe once, but I'm going now for a short time. And does it really matter if I go somewhere where it's going to cost 3 or 4 times as much or a third or a quarter? Mm-hmm. if I'm trying to get that experience that I really, really love.
Not-
and so we decided to go to a really amazing restaurant, and it was a memory of a lifetime.
Now, not we. You made all those plans without me.
Right.
So this was all you, because also the hotel that you booked.
Exactly.
It was a
same
little
thing.
boutique hotel that was more expensive than norm, and it was beautiful.
It was not too far. Like, it was in the district where the Louvre was. And you're right. Again, I thought, well, okay, so I can save 100 euros a night by going somewhere else. But this is going to be an experience of a lifetime. So yeah, no, this balancing act you're talking about, it's going on forever.
I know. And it seems like not just this of, saving and spending or whatever, just balancing in general. It's hard.
It is hard and it gets tiring, but it's still the best approach.
But you have to do it.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. It's Sheila here with Elise and John. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. So we have done a few things this week, but for me, it feels like it's the first time that I'm actually caught up since the wedding, since our son's wedding, over a month ago. I finally feel like my gardens are caught up and my house clean is caught up and I got all my spring stuff out, and then in 2 days it's going to be summer. So I got to do the whole transfer. So anyways, that feels really great. And I'd like to wish everyone a happy Father's Day. We had Father's Day here in our neck of the woods this weekend. So I hope everyone got to enjoy that. And I'd like to get back into my exercising now. Now that I've gotten everything else organized, I'd like to get back to the gym. So that's me. What about you, John?
Few things. So right off the top, I did have a great Father's Day. I felt very spoiled. So thank you everyone for that. And we got a shout out to Jay and Marnie, who dropped by Friday night just to say hi. And that was kind of fun. We had played a couple games, had some fun, talked. I want to talk about working out too, the weights. So for many months, I've been like, oh, I got to get back into weight training. So I finally got back into weight training this week and I loved it. I'm like, why didn't I want to do this? Why was I dreading it? So just kind of the message is just do it. You're going to like it. You're going to love the way you feel. I started off, I have this kind of routine that I do, and eventually I'll work up to bigger weights. Right now they're not as high, but I would do it in the morning and I'd go to work and I felt fantastic. So
that's great.
Just do it. And then another quick point, the gardens, wow. We got this place a while ago. We've been working on gardens, and probably about 5 years ago, we put a bunch of stuff in, hoping someday it would start to fill in, and it's really starting to fill in. It's really starting to look amazing. One thing I love about gardening is when you get to that point where it's like, yes, it's all working out. How are you doing, Elise?
I'm doing well. That's interesting when you're talking about gardening, because I think we're working towards it, but it's so hard because you don't really see results right away.
No. It takes years.
Yeah, it takes time, patience, and sometimes maneuvering.
Yes.
Yeah, like this didn't work here. Tried somewhere else.
Try this, try that.
Try that. And finally you find the places.
Working on it. Well, it seems to be really busy here for me. I always am so surprised at how busy June is. I think that, everything's kind of been done at school. I've finished my report cards and we're kind of just wrapping up the year, but it just seems so busy. So that's been a lot to juggle. But we actually had quite a scare over the weekend because our neighbor's house had a large house fire.
Unbelievable. And when she says neighbors, like literally the people right beside her. So explain.
So yeah, our houses are so incredibly close. When you walk between the two houses, you can't walk forward. You kind of have to side shuffle.
Right.
So that tells you how close we are to these neighbors. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I could hear the sound of the fire. I think that's what woke me up. And I thought it was rain. And then I could see the orange light through our bedroom window. And I just got up to see what it was. And there were flames high above the house. So the whole house, the whole back of the house was on fire. And we were panicking because it's just so close to us. So I did call 911. I wasn't sure if someone else had. And they arrived maybe 10 minutes later. And fortunately, everyone got out of the house safely.
Great.
So I'm so glad about that. And it was just so devastating. And we were so fortunate it didn't catch the trees that touch our porch or our deck. So we were just waiting for the fire department, praying that it wouldn't set the trees on fire. And we were so lucky.
That
and it
10
just
minutes,
is one of those moments.
That 10 minutes must have felt like an hour.
It did. 10 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it felt like every minute was 5 minutes. But yeah, it's just one of those moments though, where it makes you realize how quickly things can go wrong.
Yes, that's very true.
A little scary. And I just hope that, I know that it was renters in the house. So I hope they had renters insurance and hopefully they all have a place to stay. I know that's really tricky. So just thinking of them.
Very good. I just want to do one shout out. I actually worked a retirement party on Thursday. So happy retirement to Kathy Kuhn.
Woohoo.
Yes. So that was really fun to be able to work that for her. And hopefully she's listening, and happy retirement to her. 31 years she worked for the Catholic School Board.
And she's super nice. It's always great to see her.
Yeah. So that is the end for us. I hope everyone enjoyed the podcast and have a fabulous week. Enjoy this wonderful weather wherever you are. Thanks for listening. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.